Every morning before he leaves, my husband kisses me goodbye for the day. And every afternoon when he returns home, he kisses me again. It's hard not to take those acts of affection for granted. I know people whose spouses have missed the birth of their children while on deployment. But such is the life of military families. Not being in control is 101 if you want to be a part of this community. More on that later. But today isn't just an ordinary day. It is a special day for my husband's career. One that the family has come into town for. What's up, fam? Welcome to a new vlog. If this is your first time stopping by, hello, my name is Sade. Welcome. Generally on my channel, I share my passion for traveling, of which every now and then you'll see my husband pop in. I'd say mostly he's pretty private. And for the most part, I try and keep this little side hobby of mine, this channel, separate from my life as a military spouse for a myriad of reasons, some of which I'll bring to attention in this video. I assume that if you clicked on this video today, however, it's because maybe you're either considering getting married or dating someone who's in the service. You might currently be a military spouse yourself and just looking for a sense of community given the same highs and lows that we each face. Or maybe you're just here out of curiosity. Either way, I'm happy that you're here. And at the very least, we get to learn something about each other today while enjoying a week filled with military activities. Yay. So, a few months back, we learned that my husband had been selected for promotion. Of course, I was overjoyed for him. My husband is a career serviceman going on 16 years in the Marine Corps, and being promoted to the rank of E8 or First Sergeant is kind of a big deal, and he absolutely deserves it. But with that comes the realization that, we might have to move again. Now, don't get me wrong, I've grown quite fond of moving over the years. I don't think most people understand, though, what it feels like to have someone you don't know tell you that it's time to pack your shit and go every 2-3 years. Moving 5-6 times in the 10 years that we've known each other, let alone once, can be a tectonic shift in your life. Some people like their childhood communities and never leave. I can't tell you the last time I lived somewhere that felt like home, but there is something to be said about moving at least once in your life if you're open to it. Now, I understand that moving isn't for everyone though, but it's something that I would highly recommend. Each time has felt kind of like a new adventure. We had the privilege of living in some incredible places, but moving to some cool places isn't always a choice in the military. Trust me, there are way more crappy posts than there are good ones. Anyway, all that to say that the excitement of the promotion was short-lived once it had sunk in that we would be leaving the home that we had just bought after only being stationed at this location a little over a year ago. The anxiety quickly began to sink in as we were both unsure of where we would be forced to go next because it really isn't a matter of choice. More on that later. I would potentially be forced to resign my job or be unemployed again. Not the worst thing, I guess. But my point is, like everything else in life, there are pros and cons to this life that spouses sign up for when deciding to be with a person who serves in the military, who is basically like government property. Not kidding. There are parts of this life that can really suck ass, and other parts that make it the most rewarding. To give you all a bit of perspective, I've categorized some cool and not so cool things about being a military spouse. Now, as a disclaimer, this list is subjective, so please don't eat me alive in my comments.
That's my opinion!
Items in this list are the pros and cons that are truly based in my experiences and are my opinion, which brings me to the first item on this list that I've actually placed in both pro and con columns. This has always been tough for me because in my personal life, I can sometimes be quite opinionated, my family would say anyway, and expressing my feelings is maybe just the Pisces in me, I don't know. But as a spouse, a lot of the times your opinions must be reserved in the interest of your spouse's job. Now, it doesn't mean that you cannot have an opinion. Of course, that would be absurd. But there is this sense of decorum with what you say in public spaces because it could have an effect on your spouse's job. We all know the commander-in-chief is the president, and in any given election cycle, you might resent the person in charge, but ultimately, that is the job that your spouse has signed up for. For your spouse, there's this inherent respect for the office, whether or not he or she is a fan of the individual themselves. My husband has met with President Obama, has met with Trump as part of his duty. And that has to become first. And that's one of the hardest things that I had to realize being a military spouse. Although I have to be careful with whom, where, and how I give my opinion, there is something nice to be said about not really giving a fuck about who's steering the ship because it's not my job to. I've been invited to attend events with elected officials for my husband's job, and guess what? If I don't want to go, I don't go. And I don't lose sleep over it either. It's not my job, it's his job, or her job. It's how I see it anyway. Which brings me to my next point, also listed in both pros and cons column. Continuing our week of military activities, we are in New York City for Fleet Week. This is our first time attending, so I'm super excited.
January.
Welcome to New York. I got my little brother-in-law here. He's gonna show us around, right? He's not even paying attention.
We go to Panama.
You're gonna show us around? God.
Yeah. I've never been here in my life.
Okay.
For those who don't know what Fleet Week is, don't worry, because I just learned what it is 5 minutes ago. But according to a very reliable source, Wikipedia, Fleet Week is the United States Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard tradition in which active military ships, generally deployed in overseas operations, will dock in various major cities around the U.S. Once docked, the service members aboard these naval ships can visit the city as if they were a tourist, and in turn, the public can take tours of the ships. Pretty cool, right? Throughout the city, you'll see a bunch of servicemen and women dressed in uniform, partaking in various activities around the city, and the military will put on shows and demonstrations like the Marine Corps Silent Drill Team or military jet air shows like the renowned Blue Angels from the U.S. Navy. So now that we're checked into our hotel, I'm really looking forward to hitting the streets and celebrating the servicemen and women, all dressed up in uniform, enjoying themselves. And I'm kind of biased, but I'd like to think that the Marine Corps uniforms are best dressed. No shade to the other branches.
This is literally one of my favorite markets in the city. There are several, but I really like this neighborhood Chelsea in New York City. And we're at Chelsea Market. They have shops, and it's kind of like food hall style. Several hawker style foods, so we're gonna taste some because I'm hungry.
As a pro, there is this sense of pride that you have for being a part of this community and watching your spouse be honored for his commitment to this institution, which can be a wonderful feeling. However, as a con, you can come across some very rah-rah, patriotic, borderline fascistic people when it comes to the military. And then I've seen spouses who present themselves as wearing their spouse's rank, aka they act better than others because their spouse holds a higher rank, which was really a new concept to me. This was interesting to observe joining this community because coming from a corporate environment, work was just work. My opinion, but At the end of the day, being in the military is just a job after all. And as proud as I am of my spouse, it would be weird for me to ride his coattail, and for what gain exactly? So, just me, but from the beginning, it's always been important to me to maintain as much of my independence as possible. Most people, I'd say though, are kind, normal people just trying to live their normal lives. And having a community will sometimes save your life, when you're stationed in some austere place with no family or friends, and the only people who understand what you're going through are those fellow spouses who will be a part of your community of support and help you get through those years. Making new friends. Now, I would categorize this as being a pro and a con. I've met some incredible people during these adventures, moving around the world with my husband, but with that comes a realization that time is finite. And at some point, you have to leave the community that you've built over those last few months and years. I always tease my husband for not having friends, which obviously isn't true, but in a sense, he's had to learn not to get too attached to people or to places because the reality is that we're going to leave and likely never see these people again. Sounds depressing, I know. But ultimately, the longevity of those friendships really depend on your investment in continuing them long after you've left. When I lived in Bahrain, I had a group of girlfriends who I probably spent every day with. We'd do lunch, we'd go work out together, take trips together, and then once we left, those friendships change. That will inevitably happen. And especially in this life, you definitely have to find ways to cope and/or endure those long-distance relationships for those special people that you think are worth it. Moving. Sometimes you don't meet those new friends without moving and trying out new places. And boy, do you have to get used to moving. I've gotten to the point where after too long, I'm ready to move on to the next place. 2 to 3 years, let's go, I'm ready. I'm not sure whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. My husband has a few years left, so at some point we'll have to plant our roots, I suppose, somewhere. And I'm not even sure where or whether I'd even want to. We've lived in Bahrain, in India, and now in the Washington, D.C. area, and there are so many things I like about each of these places. And although none have ultimately felt like a place that we could permanently call home, I've definitely left a piece of my heart in each. I don't even know if a place like that even exists at this point. It's kind of scary to think about, actually. Settling down. Okay, so let's talk about pay and entitlements because I have a lot of feelings on this, both positive and some not so positive. I'd say overall the government does a really good job providing a sense of security for military personnel. The military service provides a steady paycheck, which is often accompanied by comprehensive benefits such as housing allowance, health care, generous retirement plans, disability benefits, training, education, etc., etc. Service members may receive additional pay for specific duties such as hazardous duty pay, like if you're stationed in a combat zone, which can significantly boost your overall compensation. Regardless of what's going on, every 1st and 15th of the month, presumably your spouse will get paid. There really isn't that fear of being laid off or the institution going bankrupt as private companies do all the time, which generally can offer financial security for service members and their family. However, as we have seen more recently now, if the government is in a state of dysfunction, it could be that the appropriation of DoD funding is stalled, and in that case, your spouse could miss out on getting paid while still being forced to work. And of course, bills still come due. Not to mention that for some ranks and career fields, the military base pay can be much lower than what one could earn in a comparable civilian job, especially considering the demanding nature of military work. My husband might be released every day at 5 p.m., but in actuality, he's always on the clock. Taxes. I think a large benefit to military service, some of which is passed down through to the spouses, also on military orders, are the tax benefits. Certain military allowances, such as basic allowance for housing, which we call BA, and basic allowance for subsistence, are not taxable, effectively increasing your service members' take-home pay. So, for example, if you have military orders to a base in New York City, The government, according to the cost of living in New York, will give you a housing allowance in addition to your base salary. And trust me, with the way rent is just rising across the country, you will need every single penny. And like I said, depending on the home state, some benefits pass through down to your spouse. So for example, I'm from Florida, my husband's from Florida, and we're both still domiciled in Florida. But we're on military orders currently in Maryland, which has state taxes. Maryland has an exemption that if you're on your spouse's orders and domiciled outside of the state of Maryland, you and your spouse are exempt from paying those state taxes, even though you're both working in the state. Also, there are some locations that are even tax-free zones. Typically, those are combat zones, but generally, I'd say you can make a lot more money stationed overseas. As I wrap up this blog, I want to take a moment to reflect on the journey of being a military spouse. It's been quite a ride with its fair shares of pros and cons, but in my opinion, the pros have far outweighed the cons. The uncertainty of where this yellow brick road will take us can be daunting at times. I mean, we move very frequently, and just when we start to settle, it's often time to pack up again. Yet, through all the relocations, I've come to realize something profound. Home isn't a place. Home is wherever my husband is. Living the military life, like any other job, comes with its ups and downs, but one thing that stands out to me is the support the military provides for those who serve. I've met countless Marines, soldiers, and sailors, and every single one of them takes immense pride in their role. Their sense of duty and honor is contagious, extending beyond those in uniform to us, their spouses. And although I don't like to admit it, being a military spouse becomes a part of your identity, and it is something that I am incredibly proud of. So while we have yet to plant our roots in any one place, I can confidently say that we've built a home with love, resilience, and adventure. And that is something truly special. Thank you all for joining me on this journey. Until next time, peace and love to you.